Christopher Nolan was in the news last week after he released the first trailer for Oppenheimer, his upcoming movie, and it really just made me remember how much I love his movies. I watched Christopher Nolan's movies for the first time at a time before I even paid attention to who directed the movies I watched. The Dark Knight trilogy, The Prestige, Inception, Interstellar, all of those movies rank as some of my favorites of all time, and it was a long time after they had become my favorites that I figured out they were actually all made by the same person. But after the Oppenheimer trailer dropped, I did some reading and I realized there was a Christopher Nolan movie I hadn't seen yet. Following, created in 1998 with a budget of just $6,000, just a few years before Nolan would make his breakthrough with Memento. So I watched it, and it's immediately clear that this movie was made with no money behind it. It has a really different feel from a lot of Nolan's other movies, most of which had the backing of some major studio. Now currently I watch a lot of low-budget movies. I think they're really funny. I probably watch at least 2 every week. But the low-budget feel of Following is very different from the low-budget feel of like a Hallmark movie, and that got me thinking about why. Almost every low-budget movie I've ever seen feels like it's struggling to add enough bloated filler to meet a 90-minute runtime requirement. And the problem with that is, it makes me feel like almost itchy. Like, scenes in these movies will drag on for minutes at a time, and I'll be like waiting and waiting for something important to happen, only for the movie to further waste my time with shots that linger for too long, montage shots that don't serve any purpose to the plot, or plot threads that never get developed. Seriously, if I made an edit of these movies that only included the important parts, these movies would be like 30 minutes long. To those writers and directors, it doesn't matter if the stuff in these movies is worth watching, it just matters that it's in there. Following takes a very different approach. It runs just over an hour, and you never feel like you're waiting to get to the important stuff because every piece is important. And rather than pad his movie out to 90 minutes like other low-budget directors, Christopher Nolan understands it doesn't matter how long the movie is as a whole, it matters how much of the movie the audience is engaged for. The quality of the acting in Following is the most similar aspect to other low-budget movies that I've seen. Now don't get me wrong, it's not awful, but it's clear that the writing in the movie is stronger than the actors can convey. Cobb especially delivers some of his lines like he is reading them off the script. And it's interesting because none of the actors in Following went on to be big names, and it's kind of clear why. This seems like one area where Following's budget required compromise. Nolan had to work with the actors he could afford, rather than the ones who could actually bring his writing to life. It seems like the creators of low-budget movies think that music automatically enhances whatever scene it's placed in. That's why no matter what action or dialogue is taking place in the scene, they'll slap in some misplaced soundtrack over it.
Mike could have a concussion, or worse.
What Nolan and Following understands is that if the entire movie can't have an amazing soundtrack, the music should only be used in scenes where its presence enhances the action or dialogue. In other words, if the music isn't going to be good, then it shouldn't be there. Silence is preferable to distraction. And smartly, Christopher Nolan chooses scenes in Following that mostly don't require music. Look at this scene in the cafe.
What's your name?
Bill.
Well, Bill, what do you do?
Actually, I'm kind of
Between jobs right now,
Yeah, that's right.
What would you do?
Dunno.
Oh, come on, Bill, don't be coy. There's some burning ambition inside you, isn't there? Something of the starving artist in you, no?
No. No.
You're a painter.
No.
Photos.
No.
Writer.
No.
Writer, eh?
No.
But you write.
Not much.
But sometimes.
Sometimes he doesn't.
Yeah.
Now compare it to conversation scenes from other low-budget movies.
Alex, I'm sorry.
No, I should have told you sooner.
You acted like you loved me.
It wasn't all an act.
Oh, come on. You were gonna take the cash and run away with it.
I didn't know what I was gonna do. I had so many people in my head bossing me around.
I don't know what to believe.
It's like the creators of those movies think, well, the scene needs music because movies are supposed to have music, without any thought as to the needs of the specific movie or scene itself. Chase scenes, action scenes, big, exciting scenes like that need exciting music to be convincing to an audience. And since he can't afford that music, Christopher Nolan doesn't use those kinds of scenes in Following. Instead, he uses clever writing and dialogue to create excitement, and he understands that by adding annoying or generic music, it only detracts from that excitement. Because if a scene of 2 characters talking is going to sound like this, I would rather hear nothing. The biggest difference between Following and other low-budget movies I've watched is that Following's writing is much, much stronger. I feel like this is the biggest piece of evidence that budget is not determinative of quality. I'm sure Netflix spent millions of dollars on making this, and the characters sound like they are written for the purpose of delivering exposition about the movie.
When people look at me, all they see is the spoiled daughter of Beauregard Belmont, the hotel magnate. Oh, Dad, help me. I need to make my own mark in the world.
Okay. Lucky you're dating one of Hype Magazine's top social influencers then.
So you remind me every day.
Whereas in other low-budget movies, every line of dialogue feels like any character could be delivering it, Following's characters each have a uniqueness to them. They react and respond to the events of the movie with dialogue that feels like it belongs to each of them as an individual. More noticeable than the dialogue is the way that the plot itself is written. Nolan has this way of making movies where every scene is vitally important to the plot. Each scene builds on the one before it to deliver this payoff that pulls from every corner of the movie. And this is really different than a lot of the low-budget movies I've seen, where some scenes seem stuck in for no particular reason, or they introduce plot elements that never actually go anywhere. That meticulous creativity in the writing is what Following has that can't be bought with a bigger budget. So how can a person go from making low-budget movies like this to making low-budget movies like this? Well, it's entirely possible they can't. Based on my searches on IMDb, I couldn't really find an example of a director or writer starting with these cookie-cutter movies and going on to create something really new or interesting. It seems like directors and writers who are creative tend to be creative, regardless of how much money they can get for their projects, and directors who aren't will tend to churn out the most boring and predictable movies, even with a giant company like Netflix backing them up. And that's not to say that creative always equals good. Sometimes a movie can be very creative, but also bad. But I have a lot more respect for a filmmaker who tries to do something interesting and slips up along the way than I do for one who doesn't even try to deviate from a bland, basic formula. To me, this is why Christopher Nolan will always stand out as a filmmaker. Every time he releases a new movie, it's always a uniquely creative endeavor, and somehow it's always good. You always know you're going to see something new and interesting. He has this ability to build his movies around these incredibly complex and intricate concepts, but somehow make them understandable and entertaining to the audience. And next time, we're going to look at how he does it.